At Kroger, an annual Boost membership just got even better. Now you can choose from Disney Plus with ads, Hulu with ads, or ESPN Plus on us when you sign up. Plus, enjoy unlimited free delivery, double fuel points, exclusive offers, and free items. Sign up for a Boost membership today. It's an easier way to save, including new streaming options to relax with while we deliver your groceries. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we're talking about freedom. It's July 4th. It's the Freedom Day. It's the holiday of freedom. And on today's show, I want to discuss personal freedom and what personal freedom means to you. I find that many of us haven't really taken accountability of what personal freedom means to us. We don't know what it means. We haven't thought about it. And, we talk about it, though. A lot of us are, I just want to be free. I just want to do whatever I want to do. I want to live my own life. I want to be my own person. I want to drive my own ship. I want to do what I got to do. I want to be the pilot, not the co-pilot. And it's like you sit there and you think about it and you go, okay, but what does freedom really mean to me? What does it really mean? And how do I get freedom in my life? And I know that many of you out there have determined that in the last few months. Well, it doesn't seem like we're living in a free area. It seems like we're being told what to do, when to leave the house, when we can't leave the house, and what we have to wear when we're leaving the house. So it doesn't feel that free. I think many of us feel like we're sidled to something in our life as well. Probably our career, our job, because we have to be. Some people have lost their jobs and they wish they were sidled to their jobs. Some of us have made decisions that we've had to stick with and we've had to deal with and we've had to make things right and we've had to overcome it and we've had to work through it. And it's interesting because I find that when we were kids, freedom was top. There wasn't anything. We could do whatever we want. We were children. For the most part, when you're a kid, you can go outside and play and all that stuff. And none of us really realized what we were getting into. I remember complaining about homework, complaining about having to go to school. And it's funny how we go from that extreme to now. And so it's like, where and what do we want to choose for our life path? Join me later on in the hour, Dan Nelson. Dan is our resident historian and genealogist. He helps us to figure out, remember, and connect the dots to history. It's all about remembering that history repeats itself. There's a lot of things going on right now that's making history. There's a lot of things going on right now that's tearing history down from the past. Almost as if some people don't want us to remember later on our history. And I'm not saying one way or another to it, but I do think that sometimes when we're living in these times, these strange times, we feel as though it's never happened before. But wait. It has. So Dan's going to be talking about how a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now in this moment has happened before. And we're going to go really into it and dig into that historical reference. So let's go back to figuring out, what is our life path? How do we figure out our life path? How do we do it? And how do we understand what we want our life path to be? And then how do we change it if we don't like what we see? See, that's the key. How do we change it if we're not happy with what we have? And how do we augment that life path to be what we want? And I know that many of you might not be working the career you want. Maybe you want to have children and you haven't been able to. Maybe you had children and you weren't able to have a career. Maybe, life got in the way and you were having to deal with a lot of muck and yuck of life. And you weren't really free. You weren't able to really live your life and do what you wanted to do because of so many responsibilities and getting out of certain things to try to be free to be able to make these decisions. I think that's the key right there. Is a lot of us are binded by certain things. We got to figure out what those binds are and how do we get past them? How do we move forward? How do we let go of what holds us back? And, I find that we have to first realize, well, are we being held back? And who is actually honestly holding us back? I find that more often than not, we're probably also holding ourselves back, right? And we're deflecting it. We're overlooking it. We're self-sabotaging ourselves in a big way. We've been doing it for a long time. And how are we doing it? How are we self-sabotaging ourselves? Are we in a dead-end job that we don't like, but we're doing it because we're told we had to? Did our parents tell us that the career that we chose was bad and that's why we got into this? Did we want to do something else with our life, but that we were told that we would never make money? There's different areas of life that people are dealing with, and I find that we all get certain things right, but usually we all have at least one or two things in our life that seems to fall by the wayside. The things that we don't seem to get right. Maybe one thing we don't get right at all. We're so far off the mark on that. We're trying to figure that out. And some of it might be a relationship. Maybe it's finding the right person to be in a relationship with, right? Maybe it's the family quotient. Maybe it's the career concept or your definition of success. I found that, like we were talking about on our last week's show, about defining ourselves and not defining ourselves by social limitations, by what society says we have to be, by what society says is successful, by what society says makes a woman, or what society says that makes a man masculine, or makes a woman feminine, or whatever. And it's interesting. I remember growing up, and as a child, I was a bit of a tomboy, and I remember I played fast pitch softball. I actually got most improved and then the most valuable player back in the softball leagues I played on. And then after a certain time, I could not compete, because I softball wasn't going to be my full on pro career. But I remember back then, and I remember in middle school, and I remember like friends telling me you need to wear makeup. And I remember my mom even saying, you should put makeup on. And I remember, it was very interesting. I even remember in high school, like when I was a freshman, and my debate coach telling me that I should probably put some makeup on. And you see what I'm saying? Like, as a kid, we're being told what to do. Like, you need to wear makeup. You're a girl. You should wear makeup. And, think about those relevant things that still happen to this day as we grow up as adults. Oh, well, where are your kids? How do you have kids? Oh, you don't? Oh, you don't? Why? Oh, You're married but no kids? Huh. Or the flip side. Oh, these kids are great. They're wonderful. Oh, where is your husband? Oh, you're not married. And all the judgment that goes on, right? All that unsaid judgment. Or, oh, you didn't go to college, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. Oh, something tragic must have gotten in the way. And I find how interesting it is when people make judgment, right? And I have folks that, I've talked to, and they say, hey, I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, or I didn't finish school, or I didn't get married, or I had children, but I ended up, I didn't love the man I had the kids with, and I didn't want to get married, or it was abusive, and all these different, and it's sad when people feel bad about it, and they get really sad, and they get kind of closed off, and they look down when they're saying it. It's interesting. It's like, all these things in life, it kind of gets to somebody. I remember years ago, a lady, a very, very wonderful woman, we were friends on social media. And it was interesting because I never knew why she never smiled in any pictures. And it was always interesting. It was almost like a Mona Lisa question. Like, why is she not smiling? I wanted to know. And then, and I private messaged her about it. And I said, I'm just asking, and she's like, well, my teeth are messed up. And I'm very embarrassed. And it really messes with my head every single day. And it's depressing. And so I don't smile. And I'm trying to save money to take care of my teeth. And I remember my heart went out to her at that moment, because I realized how much pressure everybody has to be this perfect self. And it's interesting how you can do one thing wrong and people will paint you black. And it's sad. And so if you're around the wrong people and they paint you black, that's something that you need to be aware of, because people are not perfect. People will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. I will make mistakes. Other people I know, everybody I know is going to make a mistake. Now, the only problem with a mistake is if you keep on doing it, right? You got to learn from it. And so when we're thinking about choosing this life path, we have to think about what is it that we want to have in our life. And I don't want you to think about it from the perspective of here and now, because I think that's a real limited thought process. It's kind of like the idea you're starving. What do you want to eat? You go to the grocery store, you buy a bunch of stuff. Somehow or not at the time, frozen fish sticks sounded really good, and you came home with 5 boxes of frozen fish sticks. Might be good for 1 meal, might not be good for 10 meals. So let's not look at it when we're starving at this point. Let's take another perspective, right? Let's go another way. Let's go another place. Because my theory is that if we go to the end of our life, let's say 110 years old, let's say for some of you 130, whatever you want to say, I'm going to just say average of 110, okay? You might be older, you might not, but let's say that. So let's go that and envision yourself there. Take some time. Take a moment, envision yourself there, and I want you to begin to think about, what do you want your life path to be like? What do you want? So here we are. We're looking at our life from the back end, right? Looking at it from the last years of our life, and we're trying to figure out, what did we want our life path to be? So now we're in this spot. What did we want to achieve? What are some of the things that we wanted to create? What are some of the things that at that point, if you're envisioning yourself there, you're meditating over there, you're thinking about it, what are some of the things that you would have wanted to do in this life that you didn't do? Okay, so start thinking about that. Start taking an inventory. Some of you might be in the car, so don't suggest writing stuff down right now. I mean, I'm a good multitasker, I'm going to tell you that. I can drive, I can write. I'm not a reader when I'm driving, though. I've seen people read. That's fascinating to me. Reading a book and driving. That's a lot. That's a lot going on. I don't advise that. So don't be reading a book right now, guys. You got to be listening to the show, But if you're at home and you're listening to the show, or you're in the passenger seat, or wherever you are, I want you to think about it. What do you want to do? What are some things that you want to create that you really, really want to do that's really, really important to you? And think about it from that perspective, because if you're that old, you had a lot of time, because I know that y'all aren't 110 years old right now, so you probably had about 50 extra years there, maybe 60. Maybe some of you had 70. So if you start looking at it that direction, you're like, man, I got a lot of time left. You do. So we don't want to squander it. We want to make the right choices with our life. And there's a lot of things we can do. In the last show, last week, live at USA Radio Networks, for Live Your True Life Perspectives, we were talking about this kind of stuff right here. We were talking about eliminating the desire to think yourself old. That was one of the concepts we were talking about, right? We don't need to think ourselves old. We need to think about ourselves and who we are, and it doesn't matter about age. Age is nothing but a number. I'm telling y'all. I'm telling you. Age is nothing but a number. And so we have to put that in perspective. So some of you might say, hey, you know what? I've always wanted to do this, or I've always wanted to try this career, or I've always wanted to write a book, or I've always wanted to, go back and get a doctorate, or I've always wanted to do this. Well, you know what? Time is now. I mean, what are you going to lose? What are you going to lose? Sitting around watching TV? You got less TV time? You got less time at the grind at your office that you're not really happy about the job, but, you're going to work it. You're doing the grind. And you're looking at how all these other people are talking about living their true life, living their best life. And you're like, man, I'm so far from living my best life. And that's the thing, is that I want you to start thinking about it. What is it that you want to do? I mean, is it time? I mean, have you always wanted a kid? Have you thought about adoption? If it's too late to have a child naturally, have you thought about adoption? I mean, there are kids that need homes, right? Especially here in this country right here. Okay, there are kids, and and I know folks too that run adoption clinics that you can actually find a child, and it's not as hard as they make it out to. You don't have to go to another country to go find a kid, if that's something that you're looking for. If it's, hey, you know what, I'm deciding I'm going to actually try to find someone to connect with and get married, or it's time. So let's start putting the effort into that. When I return, I'm going to be talking more about this. I'm going to be talking more about how to really focus on those life choices. And better yet, I'm going to be talking even more so about regret. And that's something that none of us want to deal with. So stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. You know it. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we're talking about freedom. It's July 4th. This is the July 4th Live Your True Life show. For goodness gracious, how are we going to be freer? We got to start thinking about our own freedom and our own direction and what we want in our life, and we want to figure out our life path, and we want to choose properly, right? We want to choose what we want. And like I was talking about before the break, I was saying, hey, instead of like being hungry and starving and going to the grocery store and buying random stuff and coming home and saying, I don't know what I was thinking. It's the same thing in life. When we're in a position where we feel like a midlife crisis or we feel like life's passing us by, we usually make rash decisions, okay? We make poor choices, or we avoid choice altogether and we just say, screw it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to focus on it. It makes me depressed. I'm just going to go out. I'm going to go drinking. I'm just going to do what I always do. And then what happens? A couple of years go down the road. It's like when I talk to some of my friends, it's like they'll say, man, I can't believe I stayed in this relationship as long as I have. It's not getting any better. It's getting worse. And I keep doing it. I keep doing it. I keep doing it. Why? I've done this for 10 years. It hasn't gotten better. What am I waiting to do? Why am I waiting to live? Why am I putting myself on the back burner? Or your health. Some of you out there, there's a surgery you need to get done. You got to take care of something. Maybe your back. And you're like, no, I'll just keep kicking the can down the curb. Maybe I'll just keep taking these pills. And, but it's like, why? Why are we waiting to live? Why are we waiting to live? And I know folks that, I'm one of those people, I got to start figuring out how to travel more. And it's hard because I work. But, it's like, I don't want to be that person later on the road going, man, I never saw anything. I feel like I missed out on a lot of my life. And I feel like a lot of us are in that place right there. It's like we're stuck in the minutia of what we're doing. We're stuck in the responsibilities. We all have responsibilities. God knows we all have responsibilities. But at some point, this is supposed to be a happy time. We're supposed to be on this planet enjoying ourselves to some degree, I think. And I feel like with that in respect, we need to sit there and figure out, okay, what do I need to be doing to try to get to a point where I can be me and be free? And what in my life right now is holding me back? And if you go to that older perspective, like I was talking about, not now, not the here and now, but go to your oldest self, like 100, 120, whatever, and look back at your life and say, what would you change? Because, it comes from a different perspective. I've met folks that were, older, very old. And they were in, a living arrangement, an elderly living type arrangement. And they told me some things, and they would say, I really wish I would have done this. Or I wish I would have believed in myself more and I would have chosen this. Or I really wish I would have gotten out of that marriage because it wasn't benefiting me and I was doing it because I was just scared. Or I wish I would have done this, or I wish I wouldn't have done this and done that. And it's like, I don't want people to ever have regret, but that's something we got to think about is like, regret. None of us want to regret anything. I don't want to regret anything. And I'm working on that right now. I'm doing an inventory myself. There's things that I want to create and do in my life, and it's important to me. And I got to figure out how to do it. And I got to put some stuff on the back burner, and I got to move some stuff to the forefront, and I got to figure out how I'm going to do it all. But at the same time, it's a little overwhelming. It's a little stressful, but I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. And I know that if I really think about what it is that I want to create and what it is that I want to do, somehow or not that's going to converge together and create the reality that I want. But it's going to take time. It's not like poof. Look, presto changeo, new life. It takes work, it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes consistency, it takes belief, even when you're uncertain and don't even know if you should be believing in this. Miracles happen every day, but we have to believe it. But I want you to begin thinking, what's missing from your life? Is there something missing from your life that you could take care of in the next few years that would bring joy into your life, even if it seems a little overbearing, a little stressful, a little scary? Oh, Lord, I don't know. It's the unknown. It's the unknown. What am I going to do? It could be that way, but you know what? This is some powerful stuff we're talking about. When I return, Dan Nelson's going to be joining me live. We're going to be talking about freedom. We're going to talk about how history does repeat itself. It's very powerful stuff. The monument's coming down. This isn't the first, This has happened before. But don't miss it, because when we're talking about that, we're also going to be talking about getting that life path together and figuring it out, okay? You got this. Stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about freedom. It's July 4th. It's our July 4th Freedom Show. We got to be free of the pain and suffering that we're dealing with in our life, free of the things that are holding us back. And a lot of times we can have people in our lives that feel like they're holding us back, but it directly reflects on the fact that we're actually holding ourselves back. You know, we can be derailing our own life and our own happiness because we don't feel like we're worthy. Many of you out there listening might feel like you're not worthy to be happy, like you're not a good enough person, like you have to go through this penance to deal with this stuff. And then over time, you know, it's like then we get into a place where we feel regret, sadness, angst, anger. And I don't want anybody to feel like that. I don't want to deal with regret. Regret is not something that I want. And I know it's something that you don't want either. So what are some things that you can begin doing right now in your life? Something, one thing, maybe 2 things. Like, you know, it's funny. I think I brought this up before, but when people tell me they want to make changes in their life, it's like, okay, but we can't change everything all at one time. We can't. You know, they're like, well, I want to end this relationship, and I want to, like, go back to school, and I want to quit drinking, and I want to quit smoking, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And it's like, okay, let's pick one thing. Let's pick one thing, and then let's move forward, right? I mean, there are folks out there that can quit drugs, quit drinking, quit smoking, and become a vegan. I actually know a couple of people. But you know what? I'm not advocating that for everybody. Because what happens here, it's like going to the gym, right? We go to the gym, you go crazy at the gym for 3 days in a row, you get hurt, and what do? We stop. We get derailed. Oh, that was too much. I was just trying to bite off more than I can chew. Okay, so let's pick one thing. And what's the thing that's giving you the most pain? What's the thing that's giving you the most angst? What is the thing that you necessarily want to change? Some of you out there have always wanted a kid. I mean, some of you might have always wanted a kid. You didn't have a kid. Well, maybe that's what needs to be on the forefront. Some of you out there maybe never got to really start your own business, and you've always wanted to, and you've had this keen sense of business, and you want to do something. Maybe you've always wanted to make something, invent something. Maybe you wanted to go back to school. Maybe you wanted to do something totally different and live off the grid and try to figure it out. Maybe you want to do farming. Get out of the job you're doing and do something else. You know, I think we all have to connect with our highest self on this and try to figure out what that means and how we need to get there. And so I'm offering a roadmap, a thought process, a way to think things through. And that's what's so vital, a way to think things through. And I think that what I would like you to do right now is just take an inventory of the things that you really appreciate about your life. It's all not about the negative. It's also about the positive. Think about the positive things. Think about what's really bringing you joy in your life. There's got to be something. But also think about the things that you feel like it would be awesome if you could have, and later on down the road, you would actually feel regret if you don't. And that's what I want you to think about. And I know it might be stressful to think about because you put it on the back burner for so long. But you know what? It doesn't have to be stressful. It doesn't have to be. I mean, we're just hypothetically talking right now. Don't try not to get into we're already there, and we're already going down the path, and oh my God, I can't do this. This is too much. I'm already stressed out. Don't worry about it. We're talking about this together. Don't be scared. It's just me and you figuring it out. Okay? And that's what's so great about it. And so you can think about it. You can come up with a plan. You can start making some calls. You can start checking on some resources. You can start figuring out some stuff and seeing, okay, and taking it day by day, moment by moment, and trying not to overly stress yourself out. because that's the key. Because everything we do takes moment by moment. We got to be mindful in the process. We can't rush into something, because what happens when we rush into something? We do something out of angst or stress. Yeah, it's bad. It doesn't work out good. Anytime we've ever reacted instead of responded, that hasn't been a good deal, has it? Anytime you react to somebody, it turns out bad, and then they yell and scream at you because now they got validity to do it, because now they've made their decision. Well, you deserved it because you yelled at them. It's interesting how we do that. So instead of reacting right now, let's just respond. Instead of reacting, let's think thoughtfully through what we want to create in our life and make it a reality. History does repeat itself. We're going to be talking about history right now and how, we're talking about the 4th of July. We're talking about freedom. We're talking about things that have changed in our life. And it's interesting how a lot of times in the news lately, we're told that something's never happened. Like, this is the first of its kind. Well, is it really? I don't think it's the first of its kind. Joining me in studio, Dan Nelson. Dan is our resident historian and genealogist. And the greatest thing about him is he actually brings to light a lot of the things that, we're told the opposite on Facebook or social media, right? It was interesting. I was asking him a question the other day about something, and he's like, the photograph wasn't even invented at that point. And it's interesting how we buy into a lot of this stuff, right? And so it's like, let's talk about the truth. Let's talk about some history. Dan, it's great to have you in studio today. So tell me, what are we going to learn today from you and your history lesson?
Well, we're going to learn about the history of the 4th of July, since that's today and that's what we're celebrating. And I'm excited to be able to share it with you. I'm excited just that we all made it to the second half of 2020. The first half was hopefully more eventful than the second half will be.
I hope so, too. It's been a little overwhelming, to say the least, and it seems like we're always doing some sort of record-breaking thing that's never happened ever in the history of the world, but I don't think that that's the case.
No, it's not. We'll share that today. The history of the 4th of July has a lot to do with some of our current events. So basically, 4th of July, or as we call it, Independence Day, sort of started, you think, well, how do these holidays get started? Because it's not like for 2,000 years the 4th of July has been celebrated. So it became sort of a big deal in Britain, which was the country that we split off of, to have these days. They just say, hey, let's have a celebration. So we'd have hey, all the Protestant attacked the Catholics' Day, so we'll have name that after a saint. And then we'll have the King's birthday, and we'll make that a day. And they started these days that were important. I don't think it's because the peasants got a day off, but maybe they get a drink or a meal out of it. They'd put them in red letters in the almanacs, and the almanacs were sort of where people went to look for information. And so they were called red letter days because they were in red ink. So people would look forward to these red letter days. And they'd, ring bells on those days. They'd sing songs. Sermons were given. The king, of course, always had to be toasted. Don't want to miss out on that. And so they'd, have all these types of events. So all that tradition got brought to North America. There was actually the Stamp Act, which was hugely unpopular and led to some of the revolutionary activities. They had Stamp Act Day, and they had parades, and they had dinners and celebrated. So the Continental Congress actually declared 2 national fast days to sort of celebrate, and you would fast, which doesn't sound like much fun compared to partying and drinking and so forth. But they were July 20th and May 17th. July 20th, 1775, May 17th, 1776. But I guess the fasting just wasn't that popular, so it ended up being the 4th of July. And what happened on the 4th of July? What is it, some 244 years ago this year? They tore down the statue of King George III in New York City. Yes, they tore down a statue. I know, it's hard to believe. We thought this was the first time that had ever happened. And that marked the beginning of 4th of July as we sort of know it today. So they hacked the statue to pieces, which I'm not quite sure how you hack something made of metal, but they did. And it said that the metal bits were later used to make bullets, used in the Revolution. And they took his pictures, and his royal arms were burned at the time. So it was quite the deal, to take down this tyrant, because King George was blamed for, all the woes between Britain and America and the suppression of the colonists. So they even had an effigy made up of him, and this was in Long Island, and they had a wooden broadsword that they tore down, and they hung him in this effigy and exploded him and burned him, and they rang bells and had bonfires, and it was quite an event. So that's sort of how 4th of July came about, and it sort of stood for this day of celebration for America's independence. So I don't know if they'd have torn down the statue on July 7th, we might be celebrating a different day. But I think most people would find it interesting today to know that it all came about by the tearing down of a statue.
That's amazing. And I think that a lot of us have no idea. I had no idea about this, and we were talking about this on the phone, obviously preparing for the show, and you were like, oh, yeah, this has happened before. I mean, it's funny how they don't talk about this in the news that this happened, and this is kind of the whole reason for what we're doing.
Right. And, whether, I don't think, I hope that we're not the start of a revolution and these statues being torn down and stuff like that. But certainly, this tearing down of a statue of somebody that was viewed as a bad person, is not unprecedented. And it may be, a cornerstone of change. So it's interesting to see how, depending on how you're looking at history, how it relates to your perspective.
Do you think that the tearing down of these monuments will change history or kind of erase history to some degree?
I think it probably won't cause it to be erased. I think you'll have to work harder to find it, which is what I do all the time, is, work harder to find it. So to the degree that people are lazier about getting information from the past, there's a risk that history gets lost. I mean, how many people, went from reading in-depth newspapers to reading USA Today, which, is called Mick News, to now they read Apple News on their phone, and, the articles get shorter, the attention spans get shorter. So in that sense, history is always at risk of being lost or reinterpreted. So, I have some of my own personal views, but I would like to find some happy medium where maybe the history isn't lost, but certainly it can be repurposed into a place where people won't find, daily offense, have to drive by something or feel bad about it. But, depends how far you want to take things. I mean, is Columbus, Ohio going to be renamed and, city branding rights going to be sold and it'll be called Googletown, Ohio? I don't know. It's stadiums do it, so.
You're right about that. That's interesting. Yeah, we're kind of in an interesting place, and I think it's trying to figure out who, when we talk about identity, and I've been talking about the life path, it's interesting how, countries, and our country for that matter, is dealing with an identity crisis as well, at least, I think, to some degree.
Yeah, I think that right now we're a little bit, struggling. It's sort of interesting how this happened in the sense that we're sort of sailing along, and I realize everybody wasn't sailing along, but the economy was doing well. People's 401ks, most people that wanted jobs had jobs. Maybe they didn't make as much money as they wanted or wasn't the job of their dreams. But we're sort of sailing along, sort of worrying about things that in perspective weren't that significant. And then boom, this virus comes in and just in a super short period of time, just changes everything. I mean, we've had big events before like wars and stuff, but wars were slow builds and slow exits often from those wars. This was like, bam, overnight. Everybody, there's not a single person out there who can say, oh, I wasn't affected by it. It had no bearing on my life.
You're right. I mean, everybody was affected to some degree or another.
Yeah. And everybody has their story of how it changed their life in terms of inconvenience at a minimum to, dramatic change, the loss of income, loss of important people in their lives, loss of life. And it's certainly, feels like an intersection that it'll be interesting once we get to the other side to see what it looks like.
Well, and that's why it's so important right now to think about what is your life path. And I think that, knowing that we don't know necessarily what's going to happen in our future and not judging it from the moment we're in, but like kind of looking at the long perspective and saying, well, as far as playing long game, what is it that I want to do no matter what? And what can I control in my life? What can I control? I mean, and I'm not talking about control overly, but I'm saying there are things that you can do to change your life that's within your control, and finding out what those things are.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's easy to get paralyzed in times like this. Certainly everybody has their moments where, well, let's just wait and see what's going to happen, this and that. We were going to do this major or minor thing. And you can say, well, let's just see how things play out. Well, you could spend a whole lot of time just letting see how things play out. They could spend weeks, months, years doing that. And at some point, you got to get on with what's important to you, because the whole rest of the world isn't going to, freeze when it's convenient for you and then move when it's convenient for you. Things are happening. Things are changing all the time. And you can either be part of one of those things that's changing or, hope it goes away.
That's so true. And I think a lot of you out there that are listening to the show, you're realizing, hey, I don't want to sit here and wait any longer. I've done that in the past. I've done it multiple times, been paralyzed to act, not sure what to do. And that has really cost me a lot of time. And now it's my chance to do something. When Dan and I return, we'll be talking more about this and more about how to really find that purpose and really understand what regret is like, and how to understand that it's important to not get to that regret position. That's the thing, is that we got to live in the moment to some degree. We got to be mindful to some degree. And more than that, we got to be true to ourselves. What is it that we truly want? What are we missing out on? And what can we gather from our life that we definitely want to try? Even if we don't know how successful we're going to be, let's actually look at it and make these changes. So stay tuned. Stay on the dial. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time, you know it. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about creating that new reality, choosing that consistent life path, being conscious about your life path, making choices that you want to make. Dan and I have been talking about history and how history is changing, and how, over history, countries and people try to figure out their identity and try to figure out what matters to them. And so, one of the biggest things that I want to harp on is that I don't want you to feel regret in your life, okay? I know what regret's like. Well, I really don't, because I try not to regret things. I try to make them right? Or I try to get through it. I don't want to sit with that heaviness, right? So I want you to think about it. I want you to name one dream, one thing that's not an impossible dream that you want to begin to do. I want you to think about one thing that you've always dreamed about doing that's not impossible, right? I'm not talking about necessarily walking on the moon right now. There's a lot of things that we got to figure out, but I need you to think about what is one thing that you've thought about. Dan, it's interesting how I think that a lot of times, I think that we know what we want to do, but we tell ourselves we can't, or we scare ourselves, or we're just like, oh, it's just too much work, and so we don't actually go down that line of doing something, and that can lead to regret.
Yeah, absolutely. And fear, right now people are dealing with a lot of fear, and you need to sort of think about, yes, okay, it's one thing to take certain steps to prevent yourself from being exposed to a virus. It's one thing to take certain steps in terms of what you choose to do, but not to the point where you take no chances of anything bad happening to you because of that fear, and you go take a risk, and you go see. If you're not working right now, maybe it's a good time to check out another field, because you're not getting the income from that field anyway. So there's new fields, coming about. I have a friend who's he worked in the casino industry. Well, the casino industry sort of disappeared. Maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. So you know what? He did online classes on how to be a contact tracer. It always been interesting to him. It's a little bit of detective work. And so he's sort of reinventing himself in that regard. And if turns out we stop doing contact tracing, I guess he can always go back to the casinos.
That's interesting. It's like, exactly. It's about following someone's passion. And right, if things have been moved out of your life, even if it's something you didn't want necessarily moved out of your life, it's about really kind of connecting with what you want. And I know that some of you out there are like, hey, I really think I want a different job and I would really like to do this. Well, let's figure out how to make that happen. If you've met someone but you feel like you're too old to get married, let's make that happen. If you've been, alone for a while and, you lost your loved one or you were divorced and you want to start getting back out there and maybe meeting the new love of your life, let's start making these things happen. I just don't want you sitting on the sidelines of life regretting later on as you watch other people live their life.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with that. Because it's easy in these times to get just focused on the negative, listening to the news, letting the news worry. I mean, the news is designed to give you depressing things to worry about. There's not like a happy news channel you could switch to, and just turn it off and get on with your life. It's not going to change that much.
You're right. And watching TV, I mean, I know that it can be entertaining, but again, we're sitting on the sidelines. We're not participating in our life. And so one thing that I want to leave you with today is I'd like you to do one thing every other day or every 3 days that are going to get you closer to your goal of what you want to achieve. I'm not saying that you have to do it every single day. It's like telling somebody that they have to work out every day, okay? It's not going to happen. It might happen, but I think you'll get momentum eventually. And so I want you to do something every 3 days to get you closer to this goal, whether it's researching or making calls or reaching out to people or getting more information or doing your due diligence online or whatever it looks like to get closer to that goal and to understand what it's going to take from you to make that happen. Dan, I've enjoyed having you in studio today. It's great, and we're going to have a lot more fun because it's July 4th.
That's right. We'll go out and listen to Kaboom.
From a distance.
From a distance. Socially distant from fireworks.
Socially distancing. So I can't wait to see you next week in studio. You'll be here?
Yep.
Awesome. And, for everybody that's been listening to the show, thanks for tuning in. This is all about you. This is about finding out more about you. This is a show dedicated to you, figuring out your perspective separate from other people's perspective. It's about how you want to be. It's not about how you were raised. It's not about what you were told. It's not about what you were told that you had to do. None of that. None of that is required. This is a show that's based on you and solely you. And what you take from it is directly reflective on what you want in your life. So do one thing. Do it every 3 days. Do something. Get on the phone. Make some calls. Google some information. If you want to do this, you want to do that. Figure it out. Start getting the information you need to start making the choices in your life. The more educated we are, the more powerful we are. We have a great show for you next week. In the meantime, check out the website, ashleyburgess.com, as well as checking out the YouTube channel with new video content up every single week. I can't wait to see you next week, and I can't wait for you to be listening to the show and live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.
At Kroger, an annual Boost membership just got even better. Now you can choose from Disney Plus with ads, Hulu with ads, or ESPN Plus on us when you sign up. Plus, enjoy unlimited free delivery, double fuel points, exclusive offers, and free items. Sign up for a Boost membership today. It's an easier way to save, including new streaming options to relax with while we deliver your groceries. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Restrictions apply. See site for details.